Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Um, Hi, my name is Lillian, and I am the Education Outreach Coordinator here at Openlands. And it's truly delightful to just see these large amount of people coming in and to talk about advocacy, specifically bird advocacy. So welcome.
Morning, I'm Jerry Edelman, president of Openlands, and just want to say welcome and thank you so much for your interest, your commitment, all you do to make our city and region a healthier, more vibrant place for nature and for all people. And so great to have you with us today. Thank you.
And for those of you who just jumped on, we're asking you to just chat your name and affiliation and why you're joining us this lovely Saturday morning.
Good morning, Jeremy and Jerry and Lily and crew. This is Mike Byer, Chief of Staff at Openlands. I'm joining while on the road. I'm actually waiting for my son to finish his swim meet. If you didn't think swim meets could be any more boring, they're even more boring. Now you have to wait outside. So fortunately, I have some time to join, and I'm looking forward to the workshop this morning.
Good morning, I'm Stephen Gross. I'm a volunteer with Birds in My Neighborhood. I volunteered for Openlands for years, since the 80s. I'm a big birder. And my name's not Ethan Gross, it's Stephen Gross. That's my son. I can't figure out how to change it.
Pleased to have you.
Pleased to be here.
Again, thanks for joining us. For those of you who are not familiar with Openlands, we're a nonprofit conservational organization, one of the oldest and largest in the nation. We're all about connecting people to nature and building advocates for nature. And what better way to do it is to use birds. And you're helping us fulfill our mission. So again, thanks for joining us. And shortly, I'll be turning it over to Lillian Holden. She's the Education and Community Outreach Coordinator to help start you all with a little icebreaker. So we're right at about 10:05. So Lily, take it away whenever you're ready.
All right, everybody. So let's just put on our student caps because we're going to do a little icebreaker that is in the true and false quiz form. So it'll be 5 questions about birds and advocacy. And so I'll be launching it right about now. All right, so it is launched and we're going to take about 2 minutes to all respond.
I think that was true.
Also, no pressure.
Development. 10. I'm going to say false.
This is fun. And remember, we want everyone to leave with learning something. So it's okay to get a wrong answer because we want to educate you so that you can go home learning something. So it's okay to get a wrong answer. For those of you who had just joined us, we're doing a mini icebreaker.
right, so we're over our 2 minutes, and so I'm going to end our poll. And also for anyone just walking in, we are recording this session. Just a heads up. All right. So next, I'm going to share results. And these are all being shared anonymously, so no worries on that end as well. So I'll go through each one and briefly just talk about the statement, and I'll be looking at my notes while doing so. So the first one is one of the earliest laws put into place to protect birds was the Migratory Treaty Act of 1918 to curb the hunting, killing, and capturing of migratory birds. 95% of us said true, and this is true, it's correct. So interesting as it may be, and also a bit disappointing as it may be. There was a time where egret feathers were the worth of their weight in gold, and were sought out for the hat trade. So the trade of hats, women's fashion, and records show that more than 1 million heron and egret skins were sold in London between 1907 and 1911. And so the way some of the plume traders would do, they would shoot birds in huge packs and skin the birds and then leave their younglings to survive for just to fend for themselves. So this treaty has been pivotal in protecting bird species from being slaughtered and murdered. So, two, federally, America is a leader in the area of creating, enacting, and implementing laws to protect bird species. So this is actually false. And I see that 54% of us said true. And so this is actually false. Our northern neighbors, Canada, are the leaders in creating, enacting, and implementing laws to protect birds. And they've been actually trailblazers in the efforts due to a couple of acts that were created. So in 2007, Toronto led a voluntary bird-friendly development guideline for new and existing buildings to create safer conditions for birds. And in 2009, that became mandatory. And then there's also light reflected off windows are considered a violation of the EPA because of the adverse effects of birds. So statement 3, in the US, 10 municipalities proposed mandatory bird-friendly development guidelines for new and existing buildings safer for birds. So this is true. And I mentioned earlier, Toronto being our bird policy trailblazers, and a lot of the mandatory bird development guidelines that were implemented in the US, they're inspired from Toronto. And San Francisco is one of the first major cities to adopt the legislation, and it's been trickled down like the domino effect to other counties. And Chicago currently is an impending factor, but New York is had since December 2020 implemented the law. And so I'll just speak to the last two. I don't want to take too much time. So number 4 is Chicago's location is in the heart of North America's most trafficked area corridor. So this is true. And this just hints on the Mississippi Flyway and it being a migratory pattern for birds, and Chicago with its sky rises and fragmentation, causing the pathway to be a hazardous zone. And then we have birds offer humans pest control, seed dispersal, ecotourism, and help with environmental monitoring and assessment. So 100% of us said true, and this is true. These are just just to lay out the benefits of birds and how much we rely on them. Birds are, and some, it can be considered that birds are stakeholders in our ecosystem. So we're depending on them in so many ways. And so I'll just leave it there. And thank you all for taking this poll and for answering and for being bird advocacy students for the moment.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lily. And just a reminder that this session is being recorded just for educational and training purposes. So thanks. And I just want to remind everyone to mute yourselves if you are not speaking, and then ask members of the audience to write down any questions or comments in the chat while panelists are speaking. And then there will be a question and answer period towards the end where we can address those questions. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Openlands' very own Molly Cordes, who's a staff attorney. And Molly will be talking about an overview of our Openlands work on bird advocacy, some of the local efforts, and how it connects to some of the larger scope of work. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to you, Molly. Take it away.
Thanks, Jeremy. Let me just get my presentation up here. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through a quick kind of overview of some of Openlands' past and current advocacy work around birds. So we commented both on the Migratory Bird Treaty Act regulations and the Endangered Species Act regulations that were changed under the last administration. Just kind of a quick description of what that was. So as Lily mentioned, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act was an incredibly important law. It was like one of the first major international environmental treaties. And it was really key in protecting migratory birds, especially in the US and Canada. And under the last administration, some regulations were changed so that incidental take is no longer criminal under this law. And basically what that means is that if migratory birds are killed or harmed on accident, so not so much by individuals, but by like large companies with electrical lines and dangerous hazardous equipment that can harm birds, that's no longer considered a criminal act because it wasn't intentional. So that really took a lot away from what this law was supposed to be, especially since this law has been so key in being able to prosecute folks like when the Deepwater Horizon BP oil spill happened. The MBTA was actually like a huge reason that those companies were able to be held accountable because it wasn't intentional, but they harmed thousands of migratory birds in the process. And then the Endangered Species Act regulations just really quickly were rolled back. The blanket protections that kind of always existed for threatened species were taken away. So species have to be listed specifically as endangered to get full protection under the law, whereas there were kind of blanket protections in place for anything listed as threatened before. And then for the first time, they allowed the agencies to consider the economic cost of listing a species, which had never happened before. And the courts have actually held for decades that the cost of protecting these species is priceless. So we typically don't look at what the economic cost is. And then lastly, it didn't really fully take into account impacts from climate change, like habitat loss. And then finally, we also advocated in some efforts around bird-friendly building design. So there were some state efforts. There were also some city-based efforts here in Chicago because there was a report that came out in April of 2019 that found, because of, like Lily mentioned, all of the high rises and skyscrapers in Chicago and where we are within the Mississippi Flyway, Chicago is actually the most dangerous city for migratory birds. So just real quickly, the panelists will probably get more into detail about some of these advocacy tools, but I just kind of want to go over them. We do a lot of action alerts. So making sure people can get in touch with their representatives and know who those people are, and are able to, have a voice and reach out and make sure their representatives know what's important to them. We also do a lot of comment letters, like on the regulations that I talked about before. Those comment letters are really important. It can be really effective if you can just get tons of people to flood the agencies and let them know that, we think this is a horrible idea or whatever it might be. And you can make public comments on any regulation that occurs on the federal or state level. And then obviously advocacy emails, we blog a lot on the Openlands blog. And then just participating in coalitions. There's a lot of really great coalitions in Illinois, like the Illinois Environmental Council, Chicago Wilderness. And those can just be like really great places for resources, and they have a huge voice in advocating for some of these issues. And then lastly, I just kind of wanted to throw out there some of our priority landscapes and really beautiful places in the region can be great advocacy tools. Typically, I wouldn't think of that as an advocacy tool, but there's just some things I think so effective and persuasive about actually stepping on the land and seeing some of these species, seeing some of these birds, seeing the, places like Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge, where there's just, we're trying to restore habitat where it's being lost for a lot of these grassland and migratory birds. So that can actually be a really persuasive tool. And then lastly, I just wanted to sort of throw out some upcoming opportunities for bird advocacy. So those Migratory Bird Treaty Act and Endangered Species Act regulations I talked about before, we're going to be pushing really hard for those rollbacks to get repealed. So to return the laws to what they were supposed to be, to make sure that they're being enforced the way they should be to protect birds. So right now there's actually an open comment period on the Migratory Bird Treaty Act to delay the effectiveness of what the last administration did. And then after that, we'll definitely be pushing to get the acts the way they were supposed to be fully reinstated. And then last year, the Chicago City Council actually did pass a bird-friendly building design ordinance. So now the Department of Planning and Development is going to be revising its sustainable development policy to reflect changes that should be made to like design policy in Chicago. And then lastly, the Bird Safe State Buildings Act has been reintroduced at the state level again. So that would only apply to like state government buildings, but it would require that, that they have to be built and redeveloped with bird safe design practices. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jeremy.
Great. Thank you, Molly, for that lovely segue into our next group of panelists. So let's all take time to say thank you to Molly, or give her a clap or a round of applause, however you would like to celebrate. Thank you, Molly. And just remember to please mute yourselves if you are not talking, and to chat any questions or responses, and we'll address them during the question and answer period. So thanks for warming us up. So that brings us to the next part of the session, where we have three lovely panelists, a diverse group representing us. Our first panelist will be Ellie Sanchez with the Nature Conservancy. So with that being said, we'll turn it over to you, Ellie. Take it away.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm just going to share my screen. As Jeremy said, my name is Alicia Sanchez, and I work with the Nature Conservancy Illinois chapter and their government relations department. And we advocate for conservation policy in many different realms, from safeguarding from foundational environmental laws, such as the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, to climate change adaptation and mitigation, and then to general land and water protection. However, since the onset of COVID-19, so much in the world of activism has changed. In-person meetings are no longer really an option. So how can we transition to virtual bird advocacy and maintain and establish those connections with our representatives and foster progress of important bird policy in the interim? So the first step is acquainting yourself with the online resources. And it may seem intimidating at first, but modern day technology makes keeping up with the latest in the world of bird advocacy relatively simple. There's such a wide variety of environmental news resources out there and conservation information. So how do you properly sift through it all? Well, thanks to the hard work of conservation nonprofits and environmental groups at both the local and national level, one can stay up to date with the most pressing bird-related policy matters via their email. So make sure you're subscribed to the mailing list of your local conservation groups so you don't have to do the hard work and sorting through the exorbitant amount of programs and policies out there. And via their website, you can sign up super easily, and be sure to sign up for the mailing lists of a wide variety of groups, as each group has their own strategy, and this will help acquaint you with the many different aspects of bird policy. By the way, please pause me if there's a question in the chat. I'm sharing my screen full screen, so I can't monitor it at the moment. And then the next step would be acquainting yourself with the individuals that represent you, your legislators. There are many free publicly available online resources that can make connecting with your legislators easier than ever before. With the click of a button, you can access their official email addresses, their phone number, and their regular mailing addresses. And this is for all levels of government. I included the link to the congress.gov Find Your Members tool. That would be for your federal representation, but there are similar services on the Illinois government webpage, as well as the city of Chicago, and connecting with your local representation. And so once you've established a certain issue you want to engage on and the target of your engagement, you want to familiarize yourself with the advocacy priorities of that particular individual. So most legislators have social media pages on all platforms, and this is a great source to stay up to date in real time on their involvement in bird-related / conservation policy matters. If social media isn't for you, check out and keep up with your elected officials' website's press release section. This will help clue you into what he or she is focusing on at the moment. And just familiarize yourself with their past views on the matter by visiting websites like congress.gov to look at their past voting record. The next step is organizing your outreach. The movement of public policy is often very opportunistic and hard to predict. And this is why it's important to stay up to date on the aforementioned subscription lists of both conservation groups and your elected officials. So once you receive notice that an important piece of policy is gearing up to cross the finish line, what are the next steps? So here I just wanted to differentiate between grassroots advocacy and individual action. Many conservation groups utilize grassroots advocacy, such as action alerts. Molly went into this a little bit earlier, coordinated social media posts, call-ins, etc. Take advantage of these as much as possible. There's strength in numbers, and most action alerts come with pre-written messaging and online portals that directly connect you with the legislator in question. So in this case, all of the grunt work, the hard work is done for you. And then there's also individual action. You don't have to necessarily wait until there's a larger group effort to engage your elected officials on bird policy. Using some of the aforementioned resources and tools, there will be times where you notice an opportunity to engage, but you haven't heard of an organized larger attempt to do so. Even so, that shouldn't discourage you from taking action. Never limit or underestimate your contribution and power as the individual constituent. And then the third piece of the puzzle, actually making contact and initiating that engagement. So now that you've pinpointed a specific bird-related issue and elected official, it's time to discern what type of outreach is best to pursue. In the world of electronic communication, especially with recent events and quarantine and lockdowns related to the pandemic, what's the choice mechanism to achieve that connection and communicate your message effectively? The answer will be very situational based on the issue and and timing at hand, but here's just a few examples of your options. There's good old email. It's a really quick and simple and efficient way to advocate for bird policy. And using one of the links on the first slide, you can access the official email addresses of your representation. And then social media. If you are active on social media, follow your elected officials' social media pages. Be on the lookout for anything bird or just conservation related in general, and don't be shy. Engage, like, and comment with their posts. There are staff members monitoring these pages, and they want to see which issues are most pressing for constituents. You'll see oftentimes there's the option to participate in virtual town halls / public meetings. It's quite common for legislators and other government agencies to hold these. If you hear about anything related to bird advocacy, be sure to attend, and you'll hear about these through those newsletters and subscription lists that I mentioned. You may even get the opportunity to make a written or even verbal comment. And then let's reel it back and talk about phone calls and written letters. Especially with events of the past year, we're all craving a bit more of that personal touch. And even though there's so much emphasis on the new digital world, sometimes it's nice to just take a few steps back, and channels such as a phone call or a written letter add a personal touch to your outreach and is much more likely to stand out. And then last, but certainly not least, I have a few general tips and tricks for best practices. So it goes without saying that we've faced an unprecedented year nationally and globally. Matters of public health and employment are rightfully dominating the policy arena right now, and this is placing increased demands on our legislators' schedules. Just try to be sensitive to this when performing your outreach, and if you aren't receiving the type of active responses that you originally hoped, just try to keep this in mind. Then establishing constituency and personalizing your message is such an important key here. When interacting virtually or in person with legislators, make it clear that you are a constituent. Bring your own experiences of bird advocacy and stories into the picture. At the end of the day, legislators want to hear how bird conservation has impacted individuals in their own districts. And you can be the one to convey that message. And last but certainly not least, explore other avenues of conservation policy as a larger vehicle for bird policy. A piece of legislation or program doesn't have to be 100% bird specific in order to benefit birds. An example would be the Great American Outdoors Act, passed in summer 2020. The milestone bill fully and totally funded the Land Water Conservation Fund, which greatly increases investment in our nation's national parks and then more local parks and preserves. And it also addresses deferred maintenance projects in these areas. This will, by proxy, inevitably end up helping protect and strengthen bird habitats. Think about both the indirect and direct potential of these programs and policies, and ask yourself, how could this help birds in the long run? And that kind of ties it all back together for me. With that, I'll toss it back to Jeremy to move on to the next panelist.
Thanks, Ellie. Lots of great information, good resources. We see the messages and questions and resources being shared in the chat, so please keep them coming. Just as we did with Molly, let's take a moment to thank Ellie for that lovely presentation. So however you would like to, let's thank her. So thank you. Just a few items. Just a reminder for those, so we're trying to keep track of who's actually participating. So if you could attach your name to the image so that we can keep tabs on who's here, that would be very helpful. Lily, was there anything else? I'm trying to monitor the chat as well. Any other housekeeping while we're here before we go on to the next panelist?
That's definitely the first thing that comes to mind. So I don't have anything.
Okay. All right. That brings us to our second panelist, Kristen Murphy, who's with the Audubon Great Lakes. So welcome back, Kristen, and take it away. It's all yours.
Thanks so much. I'm going to go ahead and also share my screen. All right. Can everyone see my slides? Yes, okay. Awesome. Well, thank you all for having me here. It's really great to see so many people joining on a Saturday morning who are interested in advocacy. My name is Kristen Murphy. I am the Government Affairs Associate for Audubon Great Lakes, and I'm based in Chicago. Audubon Great Lakes is a regional office of the National Audubon Society, and through conservation, community engagement, and advocacy, we're working to protect birds in the places they need across these 5 states here. So Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. And Audubon is also working at the federal, state, and local level to advance and protect policies that benefit birds and people across the region. And we also have a powerful bipartisan network of chapters and members to support this work. So in Illinois alone, we have over 54,000 members and 11 chapters. And I saw some people in the chat who are like, I'm an Audubon member, so it's great to see you here. Welcome, and glad there's so much interest in advocacy. So today I'm going to talk to you all about some of the policies that Audubon supports, many you've heard about already, and then use an example of an advocacy tactic that we've used to help mobilize our supporters to advocate around a particular issue. So fair warning, policy always has acronyms. So everything's going to be an acronym here, and I'll make sure to clarify, but sorry if I skip over something, and feel free to ask if I accidentally use one. It's just the jargon we use every day. So as you've already heard about, Migratory Bird Treaty Act, or MBTA, is of course a huge national priority of Audubon's as well, because it is the most important bird protection law in America. So we really fight hard to ensure that there are no rollbacks happening and that it stays a strong law for bird protection. So here I've included a couple of screenshots of a social media post as well as an email that we sent out actually just last week with an action alert. So an action alert is where we ask you as a constituent, as a member, to help influence policy by sending a note to your decision maker about a particular issue. So for example, here in this case, the current administration has delayed implementing those very terrible rollbacks that you all heard about. They said, let's hit pause, let's reevaluate, and let's have an open comment period. So right now, the Fish and Wildlife Service is accepting public comments to help inform the next steps that they take to hopefully reverse the terrible rollback and to make MBTA stronger than ever. So the ask here is that we are saying, please take action. Please send a public comment supporting the restoring protections for birds under MBTA. It's really easy. As you can see in the social media post and the email, there's a button, there's a link where it says take action. If you click on this link, it will take you to an online form, and you just fill out your name, your address, your email. We provide a draft letter with some suggested language to use, but you can also customize it. You can write your own. It's totally up to you. But it's really easy, and it takes about 5 minutes to fill this out. So that's what makes these so effective, is that they're quick and that lots of people can do it. So Carla, to answer, I saw a question come in about, does it make sense to submit individually or through an organization? It really doesn't matter. We just try to make it as easy as possible. But if you want to submit individually, you can do that as well. But the more comments, the better. This is like a numbers game for sure. So to give an example, last year, there was a very similar action alert that went out. Same deal, asking for public comments to be submitted to Fish and Wildlife. And through an action alert that looked just like this, Audubon actually had over 43,000 comments submitted to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And that was out of a total of 200,000 comments. So we had about a quarter of the comments that went into the Fish and Wildlife Service all saying, please do not proceed with these MBTA rollbacks. So it's really powerful to see those sorts of numbers. And like I said, it's very quick, it's very easy, and it's a great way to let decision makers know how you feel about a particular issue. So again, just one of many ways that we've advocated for MBTA, but I think a particularly effective one when there's so many people who care about this really important bird protection law. So next, I'm going to talk to you about the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, also known as GLRI. This is a regional priority for Audubon Great Lakes. And I actually have 2 success stories to share, which is very exciting. Sometimes those are less common in the environmental field, but we had 2 big wins here for birds in the last few years. So GLRI is a bipartisan supported federal program that provides funding to restoration projects to address the biggest threats facing the Great Lakes. So that includes things like toxic algal blooms, invasive species, drinking water quality, and the loss of critical habitat for wildlife. So as you can imagine, this fund goes towards restoring bird habitat as well. And it's actually a really important funding source that Audubon Great Lakes uses in our restoration projects as well. And it's done a lot of good. It's been in place for about 10 years and it's been a really, really big success. So one tactic that we've used pictured here on the left is attending public meetings. So back in 2018, the EPA hosted a series of public meetings in each state to solicit public input on the GLRI action plan. So this action plan is what guides the federal investment and priorities for Great Lakes funding. It helps them, you know, they look at it and they say, okay, this is where we need to focus our funding efforts. So we had chapters and members actually attend all 6 public meetings in the various Great Lakes states, and they made informed comments, they participated in discussion, and they talked about the importance of birds to GLRI. And through our actions, actually 2 years ago in October of 2019, the EPA released its 3rd phase of the GLRI action plan. And for the very first time ever, it will prioritize the restoration of wetlands that attract and sustain breeding marsh bird populations. That was so hugely exciting. That means that marsh birds are going to benefit for the next 5 years from GLRI funding, and we can do more to protect these adorable little birds. I love seeing them when I'm out on bird walks personally. So very, very exciting win. And then here on the right, I have pictured a letter to the editor, which is another tactic that we use to help influence policy. So the letter to the editor is a short opinion piece that anyone can submit to a local newspaper. It's usually in response to something that the newspaper has published. So this one, I love this one because we use Piping Plover Day. So as many of you probably heard in the Chicago region, we had 2 very adorable piping plovers nest on Montrose Beach for the first time in over 50 years, Monty and Rose, as they were lovingly named. And part of the reason why that beach was in such good condition and was habitable for these birds was because of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. Funding has gone to this beach to restore the habitat. And that's how birds ended up there. That's how our little piping plovers landed there. So we use this awesome story to write a letter to the editor and to encourage Congress to increase funding for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And staff that work for legislators, they actually do read these articles. I know they seem very small and kind of hidden in the opinion section, but these are monitored and this will be noticed by your decision maker when you publish a letter to the editor. So it's a very effective way to get in touch with a decision maker. And positive story, actually earlier this year, legislation was passed to increase GLRI funding up to $475 million by 2026. So we're going to see more funding going towards protection of our Great Lakes, which is awesome. And the last issue I want to talk about is climate change and the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which is a state level priority for work that we do in Illinois. So in 2019, Audubon released a report called Survival by Degrees, which shows that 2/3 of North American bird species are at risk of extinction due to climate change. So we are a science-based organization and we use the science that we learned to realize that we need to start taking action and find solutions that will reduce carbon emissions at the speed and scale necessary to protect birds. So that sort of legislation, those sorts of solutions include things like the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which is a bill in Illinois that would commit us to 100% renewable energy by 2050, cutting carbon from the power sector by 2030, reducing pollution from gas and diesel vehicles in the transportation sector, and creating jobs and economic opportunity across Illinois. So one advocacy tactic we used here, which was encouraging Audubon members to attend lobby days. Clean Energy Jobs Act, we call it CEJA. Yeah, like I said, cute acronyms for everything. So it used to be really fun. We used to drive down to Springfield and spend the day there, but more recently they've changed to virtual to accommodate the current circumstances. I'm sure one day we'll get to go back, but lobby days are where you get to go meet your legislator and actually talk to them face to face and tell them why an issue is important to you. So it's just really powerful to see a large group in attendance. And the interests span the range across the spectrum. It's not just environmental groups that were pictured here in the bottom left corner. It's also faith-based organizations, healthcare professionals, community and business leaders, labor groups, even more. So it's just a really powerful way to show how much support there is and get you all excited about lobbying on a particular issue. So CEJA was just reintroduced in the Illinois state legislature, I think like a week or two ago. So we're going to continue to advocate for it. There's going to be continued opportunities to attend lobby days. And we really want to see it pass soon because this will be a game changer towards reducing carbon emissions in Illinois. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much. If any of these things interested you, if you want to get involved or learn more, please don't hesitate to reach out. I've included my email address here pictured on the screen. It's just my name, kristen.murphy@audubon.org. So I hope to hear from you and thank you again for the time.
That was awesome. Thanks, Kristen. So let's take a moment to thank Kristen for that lovely information. For those who have just joined, please chat your name and your affiliation. But thanks, Kristen, so much. We still have folks rolling in, which is awesome. That brings us to our third and final panelist, but there'll be also time to answer questions, so keep them going in the chat line. So our third and final panelist, we have Ms. Deja Perkins, who's labeled as an urban ecologist. So with that being said, I'll be happy to turn it over to Deja. It's all yours. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on the call today on this lovely panel. It's so nice to meet you all virtually and just get to speak with you all today. So I'm just going to share a little presentation about what does it mean to be an advocate. So I'm coming from more of a community member standpoint today. As you can see in this picture, I love to show this picture because it really encompasses kind of what it means to be me. I am an advocate. I speak up for issues that I am passionate about, including, birds, Black Lives Matter, women's rights, all different types of issues. But at the end of the day, at the core of who I am an ecologist. I study birds in cities. I specifically look at urban areas and how organisms interact within cities. I mostly work outdoors and I answer questions related to how human decisions impact wildlife. I'm a science communicator. I'm a community engagement specialist. So I work with people to introduce them to science. But notice how the one thing that's not listed on here is advocate. And that's for good reason. I never really originally thought of myself as being an advocate. And I really questioned for a while when it was time for me to make this presentation, like why did I get asked to be on this presentation? Like I work outside, I work hands-on with birds, I work with people, I work in a variety of different habitats in different places, looking at how development and how people impact birds. But I was really wondering, like, I'm not specifically in the policy field. Like I don't necessarily work with legislators. I don't create the policy. I'm not on the Hill lobbying for issues that I believe are important. So I kept thinking like, why was I invited to be on this panel? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I did have value being on this panel. And I had to ask myself, well, what does it really mean to be an advocate? And I think a lot of times we get caught up on these big words, we're placing these words on things. But when we really break it down to what the core of being an advocate means, it really just means speaking up for what you believe in, right? And so that means for me, I'm an advocate about birds, about getting kids, especially minority, Black and brown kids, low income kids, into nature, into the outdoors, and experiencing how great the outdoors is. I'm an advocate about connecting people with science. I'm an advocate about environmental justice issues, and I'm an advocate about sustainable cities and incorporating more nature into cities. So I really had to think about it, but I am, and I'm just a girl from Chicago, but if I really think about it, maybe my advocacy days did start back when I was younger, before I was giving presentations and before I was speaking to people more broadly about these issues that I cared about. I was speaking up on a smaller level. I was being an advocate and thinking about the things that were important to me, the places within Chicago that were important to me, because those are the places that I cared about, right? Speaking up and telling people that, hey, it's important that we think about the wildlife that live in our cities. It's important that we, put funds into green spaces and parks and have, these places for us to enjoy for a long time to come. So I wasn't thinking about myself being in the role as an advocate, but I just knew that I enjoyed the outdoors, and it was great to have experiences to travel and to visit a lot of these places that I saw on TV, and to go and, on some occasion, at one point, I did kind of dip my toe into the policy arena. I went down to DC and met with legislators, and I thought, oh, this is cool, but it's not really for me. I want to be outside playing with the wild things. I want to be where the wild things are. And so I did, and I got all these experiences working with different birds in different capacities, and it was great. But it really comes back to what are the things that we can do, and how can we, speak up for the things that we believe in. And when I really thought about my experience in advocacy, I've had only a few experiences other than the things that I shout to the heavens about on a day-to-day basis. But one of the great things that I was involved in was something called Black Birders Week, which was a social media movement that I and a group of friends, we're all young Black STEM professionals, early career professionals, graduate students. And there was an incident that occurred last year in Central Park where a white woman accused this Black man of threatening her, called the police. It was a really big incident. And the only crime he had was informing the lady that she had her dog off leash in an area that was not allowed to have off-leash dogs. And so because of this incident, because of all of the things that, it meant for us in that group, being Black in the outdoors, being a Black woman in the outdoors, being intersectional, we decided to take action on our own and really, I guess, put things in our own hands. And, instead of waiting to be invited and having a seat at the table, we essentially created our own table. And we created this social media movement to create awareness. One, Black birders exist. Black joy in the outdoors is a real thing. There are tons of Black people who enjoy being in nature, and we wanted to highlight that. We wanted to highlight the different experiences that we've had, positive and negative, in the outdoors, and start a conversation on how we move forward. How do we make the outdoors more inclusive? How do we make the outdoors safe for everybody? And so that was one instance that I had of being an advocate. But even then, in that moment, I still didn't consider myself an advocate. And I really, a couple months ago when I was being interviewed, someone said to me, when did you realize that you were a social justice warrior? When did you realize that you were an advocate for all these issues? And I had to tell him, quite frankly, that I never did. And maybe not until that point did I consider myself an advocate or warrior for all these issues. I knew that I was just speaking up for the things that I believed were important, because I knew that my voice was important, right? My voice matters. All of our voices matter. And that is really what it means at the end of the day to be an advocate, speaking up for what you believe in. And so this is an example of one of those virtual advocacy days. This past summer, I had the pleasure of interning with North Carolina Audubon. And it was a great experience. But I will tell you, this virtual advocacy day was so nerve-wracking. This was my first day on the job, and they threw me in there with the sharks, right? So I was in this space surrounded by all these people that I didn't know, brand new to the organization. So I had no idea about a lot of these issues that they wanted to talk about, aside from the fact that they were environmental issues. They were important for birds and for people, because we were talking about why, we should provide more money to the conservation fund, why we should, put more money towards clean energy and climate change and things like that. So these were all issues that I was concerned about, being an urban ecologist, being someone who loved birds. But I was like so nervous because, one, I was meeting these legislators, but I was not only meeting these people who had the power to make decisions, right? I was meeting with people who were on both sides of the aisle. And in the last, presidency, for me, I was so nervous because I didn't know what anybody else's reactions were going to be. And take a look at the people on this call. Like, I think if I wasn't the youngest person on the call, I was close to it. And, I was one of the only Black people on the call, definitely the only Black woman. And so, this is what I mean when I say, like, your voice matters. I think that at the end of the day, policy is where we can make real lasting change. We need to get these policies in place. We need to tell people about the things that are important to us so that we can put more funding towards them, because that's, money is what matters. Money, where we invest our money in this society, is so important. And how can we communicate that with the people who are making the laws and making the decisions and all of these things if we're not there advocating for what we believe in and speaking up about the things that we believe in? And it was so important for me to be on this call, because if not, how would they know that I cared about these issues? How would they know that, young 20-something Black girls cared about birds and the environment, or that I cared about the spaces in my neighborhood, the parks that I could go to in order to access, these areas? Or how could I tell the politician that, hey, I know that there are all of these other issues going on right now. I know we're in a pandemic. However, it is so important that we put money towards conservation now more than ever, and protecting these green spaces, because people are using the outdoors. They're connecting with the outdoors now more than ever during the pandemic. And it's so important that we put funds towards that so that we can keep maintaining these spaces for not only people to enjoy and get some mental relief from, but also so that wildlife that live here, there are birds live here, coyotes live here, other mammals, reptiles, like fish live in our streams, in the rivers, in the lakes, the ponds. They're all impacted by us. And so it's so important that we act as stewards and we protect these places. And I had to tell him, I know you have all these other people pressuring you, but these spaces are important for people, not just for, the wildlife that you may not care about, but the people, your constituents, it's important to them. And it's so important that we emphasize and get those points across. And I think that if I wasn't there that day, he might not have gotten that personal story about how these spaces were important to me and how I've been using it, how my family has been using the parks ever since the pandemic happened, And so there are so many different ways that we can be advocates and about all the different issues. These are some of my friends that kind of helped with the Black Birders Week initiative, but we're all advocates in our own ways in the different areas that we are passionate about. We're not all passionate about birds, but everything is connected in the environment. And so it doesn't matter what your age is. It doesn't matter, what you look like, what your background is. you can always speak up for the things that you care about. And I think what the pandemic has showed us is that there are so many ways that we can be advocates. You know, we can do it in person, we can do it online via Zoom, we can do it face to face, you know, we can do it via social media, and it just gives us the power to connect. And I think that the pandemic really gave us the opportunity to really expand our thinking on how we communicate with people and how we tell people about the things that we're interested in and what we're passionate about and the things that matter the most to us. And so I think that's the most important. So if anybody had any hesitancy or were unsure what their role is or how they can be an advocate, I think that's what I'm here to do today. That's my space and my purpose on this panel, is to let you all know that your voice is important, and it's so important that we get the voices of our community to really speak up on the issues that matter the most to us. And that's all I have.
Woo-hoo. Thank you, Deja. So let's take a moment to thank Deja for that information. Very well. Wow, what a great group we've put together. So thanks everyone for their time. I'm thinking I did get some messages requesting like a quick water break. So I think we're at a good point to maybe take a 2-minute stretch, water break, get a deep breath, look out the window, try to find a bird. We'll come back in 2 minutes, and then we'll address any questions you all might have for the panelists. But in the meantime, if there's anyone from the planning team or the planning committee that has any questions, or if I might have forgot something, feel free to let me know. But I'm stepping away for 2 minutes. We'll jump back on at in 2 minutes. So thanks. All right, here's the 10-second alarm. So the countdown is on. And 10, 9, well, you all can count. 7 seconds, 5 seconds, 3, 2, 1. All right, so this brings us to the question and answer period from the audience. You can either chat the questions or unmute yourselves to ask any questions you might have from the panelists. So we're flexible at this point. We got the information out, and now we want to hear back from you all of any questions you might have or any ideas or resources you'd like to share with the bigger group. So I'm opening it up. Don't be shy.
Hi, I'm trying not to be shy. My name is Liz Varmecki, and I live in Homewood. And right now, me and a group of other citizens would call ourselves the South Suburbs for Green Space Over Concrete. We're trying to stop the Calumet Country Club from being destroyed and all of the trees on it to make a trucking hub. And they've told us that there's no endangered species or anything or protected species that live there. But one of the main concerns that we have are obviously migratory birds, because they don't live there, but they need the trees to stop there. So we're just wondering, we're kind of just pursuing all avenues we can to try to figure out how we can save these trees in this green space. So we're just wondering what, in regards to migratory birds, could be a good defense for us to use.
I can jump in real fast. And you probably have already pursued this, but always have a data source to reference as to why those trees are important to the migratory birds, and make it as direct as possible. At the end of the day, TNC being a science-based organization, we always have some sort of study or data source or graph that we're very directly referencing. Pointing out the facts of the matter can be very effective.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. And I would say it might be beneficial to take a look at the eBird reports. Like I'm not sure if people bird there, but that would be an easy way for you to look to see, to provide that backup of, hey, there are all these birds that use this space. If you don't have access to, some like a scientist or somebody who has the time to actually create a map or something, or provide something. I think eBird is a great way that you can kind of take that into your own hands and figure out what birds are there that you can provide evidence for.
Okay, yeah, we'll see what maybe in the area. The club was private until 2018, so I really don't know how much birding has actually been done on the property, but we've kind of walked the property and we just see how big and significant the trees are. The club is over 100 years old, so the trees were planted then. So there's tons of them, and so it just seems like this is going to be a logical place that birds have to stop. But the project is moving so quickly that we're not even going to get to like migration season by the time they want to start destroying it. So I guess, yeah, getting just existing facts on migratory birds in general would be something good to show them, because we have to imagine that those birds are stopping there.
I think too, I just in general, like building a campaign and building an advocacy, a group that advocates for an issue. A lot of what Alicia talked about is kind of like what campaigners call like power building. And so figuring out who's the decision maker, who's deciding whether or not the park is being destroyed and this trucking hub is being built, and then targeting them. You could write letters to the editor, expressing that you do not wish for this country club to disappear. You can have petitions signed and have them sent to those decision makers. There's multiple avenues. I think that you can continue to express, that you don't want this place to disappear. And even if it's beyond birds, sometimes there's more. You can use multiple different issues to explain why this hub, this space is important and valuable to keep. And sometimes having various layers of why it's important can be really helpful. So I would encourage, just kind of maybe forming your own coalition or forming your own group to really push and advocate to stop that.
Right. Yeah, we've been doing that. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to take over talking about the whole thing, but right now we're trying to prevent the property from being rezoned is our goal right now, but it is privately owned. So it kind of makes options a little bit limited, so we do know who the ownership is. So we're just trying to keep the village from rezoning it, and we're viewing it through a lens of it being environmental racism because of the populations and the areas surrounding it. So we're trying to build press for it and bring attention to it, but there's so many different avenues. And obviously one of the things that a lot of people have brought up to us are migratory birds. So that's why we wanted to check in today with y'all. Thank you.
There was one question that came in, and I'm gonna pick on you, Al. I think they were asking for more information about, oh yeah, I see you responded, about the Openlands Tree Keepers Program. So Al shared a link there. If you'd like more information about our Openlands Tree Keepers Program, feel free to peruse it. And Al is really good at getting back to people really quick. So anything else you wanted to share on that, Al, while we're on the subject?
Yeah, I did have a tree keeper bring this issue up, so thank you for bringing it up, Liz. If it's still private property, is there any way to find out an inventory of the trees on site, which we could use to help vocalize the value of those trees? If they're potentially 100-year-old oak trees, that would help us make the argument that these trees are important. And even if we can only save some of them, there's a worthwhile goal to be gained out of there. Obviously, we'd love to save the whole thing and not have it paved over, but maybe we can get a partial win and save some valuable trees. So I'll allow anyone else to add or comment or add any questions to that. And real quickly, anybody who wants to know more information about tree keepers, please visit our site or just email treekeepers@Openlands, and we can get back to you quickly. Thank you, and I'll let somebody else follow up from there. Thank you.
Maybe I'll just chime in very quickly here, because we have been very involved, talking to many of your advocates, your colleagues on this, and it's a frustrating project or challenge, I should say. And, it's not in any open space plan. I know the outreach has been to the forest preserve, to others, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, all the things. So I think what Al said is not that you want to give up on the fight, but the likelihood of not seeing some development is unfortunately probably slim in this case. That doesn't mean you give up your fight. I mean, mobilize in every way, look to every avenue, if there are bird studies and so forth, to reinforce the significance. But then to really make sure you remain involved, as Al is suggesting, in the planning process, so that if it is lost, that at least some of the important natural and environmental values can be maintained, especially if there are, large old trees, which I know there are on the property. So again, I don't mean to be negative about it. It's just that, boy, this is uphill. You have been doing an amazing job. And I just want to thank you for that leadership, but also to really think about, if you do not succeed in saving the entire site, to really make sure that your voices are heard about the character, nature, design of what is going in.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it is an uphill battle, but we have, the trees are cataloged. They were cataloged by the developers. So the village has that, and we have FOIA'd that. So we're waiting to get our hands on that, but we do know that there's oak trees there. And then of course, Cherry Creek goes through the property. And so that's like 20 acres right there that they can't really interfere with. So it's not the right property to be developed. There's too many things there that are worthwhile, but of course, some development, that's what people in the community have suggested, maybe a sports facility, where there would be trees and pathways. I think there's ways that people could try to profit off of the property and it still be nature and usable. Sorry, but thank you again.
Thanks. Keeping an eye on the chat, I saw that there was a question that came up for those of you who are not familiar with eBird. There's a couple links and references there. Deja, I know you talked about eBird when you were giving your talk. You want to give a quick recap of what eBird is, how they might use it, just for those who might be in the audience that aren't familiar with eBird.
Yeah, sure. So eBird is an app and web interface that allows bird watchers to basically track what they're seeing. And so you can create lists, you can keep track of what you're seeing, how far you're going, the days, the species, and different breeding codes, all of that. And you can keep that in one location. You can see what other people are seeing in your area. So it's great for trying to explore new parks, or if you're looking for a specific bird that you want to see, it's great to use eBird for that. But it's also a citizen science project or a community science project, because that data that people are reporting is open access. So anyone can go in and access that data and look to see what birds people are seeing when, you can look by year, you can separate it by month. So you can look for specific seasons. If you're looking for specific birds, you can look at specific location, like GPS locations. So it's really a great resource. I spent my master's project working with eBird, so there are a few flaws, I will say, when it comes to the data that it is reporting. So it's great for green spaces, and so that's why I think that it might be really great to kind of look to see if there are any eBird reports at that green space that you were referring to, Liz. There might be some things that pop up there, and so it's really great for green spaces and in larger landscapes. Not the best for cities. I'm not going to go into why that is, because I don't want to overtake the conversation, but
Okay, great. I'll check it out right now. I use BirdNet for my birding because it records their songs and it helps me identify them. I really like that, but I'll definitely check out eBird and see what I can find around the area, especially because there are, I mean, like it abuts residential neighborhoods. People live there, and I feel like everywhere people live and have a yard, there are birders.
yeah. And I would say one of the main issues that I found with eBird is that you can really only see what people are reporting and where people choose to report. So that would be, I guess, the one downside. So if there aren't any birders in your area, or if that green space isn't a well-known birding destination, you might not get any hits, or you might not get very many hits. So it's definitely something worth exploring, but keep that in the back of your mind and don't get disappointed if you don't see anything in that location.
Okay, thank you.
There was one comment that was of particular interest that arose in the chat, basically talking about opportunities for people with limitations and disabilities to, observe, view birds, and how they can actively get involved with, some of our advocacy efforts or larger advocacy efforts. So I thought that, at Openlands, and I'm sure with other organizations, diversity, equal opportunity is near and dear to our hearts. And so thanks for pointing that out in the chat. So if there's anybody on this call that knows of any opportunities or resources for folks with challenges or disabilities, feel free to mention there.
I have a bit of direct experience with this. I have some family members with physical limitations, and what I do is I call the park district directly. I know for the city of Chicago, for example, out of the 31 beaches, there are 16 that have wheelchair accessible walkways on the beach. And when it comes to that, I make a direct phone call, and you'd be surprised with some of the accommodations, not just on beaches, but in parks in general. I also know in the city of Chicago, there's quite a few community gardens and natural areas with more paved over walkways that are wheelchair friendly. And so I'm not sure where the person who asked that is actually from, but please reach out directly to your park district. Oh, and Montrose Beach is making an accessible path this year. I just saw in the chat. That's excellent.
So I'll add on to that. I'm not sure what your disability is, but as far as I have taught some people who are visually impaired with my birding classes. And my biggest tip, if for people who are visually impaired, or if they have that type of disability, is to get a bird feeder. I know that was the way that I first connected with birds, and it's the way that a lot of people first connect with birds. And I love it because of course, it just gets you closer to the birds. It makes it easier to ID. You don't have to go anywhere, being someone, and I see somebody else mentioned it in the chat as well, Birdability. I was going to mention that as well. And there are great campaigns specifically for people with various disabilities, just bringing awareness, talking more about how to make the outdoors more accessible, specifically for birding. And I do believe they give tips. Somebody else, Kristen, said in the chat that there is a map where they crowdsource accessibility features of outdoor spaces around the country. So definitely check that out as well.
Great, thanks. Any other questions to the panelists? Comments? All are appreciated and welcome.
For the physically challenged, you can get feeders that offer cameras, video cameras, live feeds, and microphones. Bring the birds to your TV that are in your backyard.
Yes, I love that. If cost is no option, I know that Birdseed TV is something that's kind of new and coming out, where they do these like live feed cameras and microphones. And I just enjoy watching whatever videos that they put on social media of other people's feeders and yards. But yeah, that was a great tip, Ethan.
That sounds like a good upcoming grant opportunity. I'm excited.
What was the name of that site?
Birdsea TV. I'll drop it in the chat. It's a fairly new feature, I believe, and basically they offer live recording services, I believe. So I think you purchase the camera and then they run a feed, and it's motion activated, and so it helps to you can ID the actual birds, and also it's really cool. I cannot say how much it costs. I have no idea, but definitely check it out.
Nice, thank you.
I also do want to mention that us at Openlands, we're working on a unique partnership with the University of Chicago through their Civic Engagement Office and a Seas of Justice program. But we do have a number of college students on the call just to make sure that we get the voices heard from some of our younger, earlier, what we're calling now bird advocates. So I definitely would like to open the room for any of the students that might have any questions to the presenters or the panelists. Don't be shy. I do know that one of the questions that did come up was for those who wanted to seek internship opportunities, who might be interested in pursuing a career in advocacy, what might be some good outlets and ways to get their feet in the door aside from volunteering. So, money could be a factor for some of these more diverse audiences. And so they don't have the capacity to just volunteer. So they are exploring opportunities in which they can get paid small stipends just to get their feet wet with the interest to maybe pursue a degree in advocacy at a later time. Any questions or thoughts or resources there?
I can share a little bit. I definitely don't want to take over the Q&A portion with all my responses, but this is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and something I'm very passionate about, because I do believe that people deserve to get paid for experiences, because nothing in life is free. Everybody has bills to pay. So I am definitely one who believes that people should pursue paid opportunities and paid internships. So for me, one internship opportunity that was really great to get my feet in the door was through the Student Conservation Association. They have a career discovery internship program, as well as a directorate fellowship program. I feel like I don't know if I just came from another panel, so I'm not sure if somebody said it here or if it was in the other panel that I was in. But Pathways, looking into USA Jobs, they have things for current students, recent grads, Yeah, so Jeremy just dropped it in the chat, Student Conservation Association. Yes, it is a life-changing experience. And really a lot of these orgs will have internship experiences, they'll have paid internship experiences. They're just really hard to find. So doing your research, keeping a constant list of contacts, so keeping your network strong and reaching out to the people that you know who work in the field. Feel free to reach out to me directly, and I can assist with helping to find internship experiences. But it's always great to keep a strong network so that you let people know what you're interested in, and that way they can kind of keep an eye out for you if something does come across their desk. And so never, make sure you don't burn any bridges, and make sure you keep your network strong. That's all I can think of at the top of my head right now.
I know there's times that the Audubon groups post lots of things. Also, there's a lot of national societies that share opportunities. One that comes to mind, because I worked for them previously, is the Ecological Society of America as well. And they're always exploring student opportunities because they realize diversity is important. They realize a lot of these old senior scientists are going to be retiring soon. And so they're well aware that, we need to bring, fresh breath and fresh thoughts and fresh perspectives to help us, as we move forward together collaboratively. It's 11:21, wrapping up. Lily, I'll turn it back over to you to talk about the post advocacy workshop survey. And then we just want to thank everybody for joining us. There'll be follow-up thank you emails, and then we'll be compiling all of these resources to share them with you all, because we don't want the dream to end here. We want to keep going and keep pushing. So Lily, take it away.
So we have a short, brief survey, about 2 minutes. I'm going to share it with you all in the chat. And the hopes are for us to take some time to just respond to the survey so that we can have a better understanding of the way the workshop has gone and some lessons to learn, and also basically some pros and some cons. So I'm just going to paste this in here and feel free to take the survey. Again, it is 2 minutes, so it won't take too much of your time.
Yeah. And also Mike brought up, please, for those of you who have not subscribed yet, subscribe to our Openlands newsletter, where we compile opportunities and resources there as well. So check out our Openlands newsletter. Feel free to peruse the site as well. Deja also linked the Student Conservation Association's Career Discovery Intern Program. That was one of your first internships, wasn't it, Deja? Working on a National Wildlife Refuge. That was pretty cool.
I think all 3 panelists came from SCA at one point or another.
Wow, small world. Isn't it amazing? Yeah. How small of a world it is, right?
Exactly. I mean, honestly, through that first SCA internship is where I made a lot of my connections in this natural resource field. So SCA is great. Yeah, I agree, Lily.
Again, thanks for everyone who took time out of their busy schedules. Again, we tried to make this not just another Zoom call. Wanted to make it fun and hope it was worth your time. All of your feedback and comments would be greatly appreciated. Proud to say that we had well over 50 participants to stay on for the entirety of the workshop. And so that's always a bonus. Saturday mornings can be a little challenging given that folks are in different time zones, but we're going to continue to make the connections virtually. You all stay safe and warm, and we'll be in touch soon. And hopefully we can do a follow-up workshop in the future. So thanks so much for your time. Thanks for the Openlands team who helped us put this together. It was definitely a team approach. Thanks for the panelists. Thanks for Molly for representing us from the Openlands side to talk about some of the policy work that we're doing within our organization. Other than that, I have nothing else. Lily, Al, Ted, any other panelists, any concluding remarks, feedback? Don't forget the survey. We'll turn you loose so you can resume with your normal weekend activities.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me. This was great. Nice meeting you all virtually.
Thank you,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Here's a virtual hug. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you, everybody.
Bye, thanks.